Imagine for a moment that beneath the floorboards of your own home, behind a brick wall you pass every day, or sealed within the forgotten attic space above your bedroom, there exists a chamber, deliberately hidden, meticulously concealed, and filled with objects that someone, centuries ago, decided the world should never see again. This is not fantasy. This is not the invention of Gothic novelists or the fevered imagination of conspiracy theorists. This is documented reality, repeated across continents, across centuries, across cultures that supposedly had no contact with one another. From the grand estates of Victorian England to the merchant houses of colonial Amsterdam, from the monasteries of medieval Spain to the townhouses of 18th century Boston, builders consistently created spaces that were meant to remain forever undiscovered. And when modern renovators break through those walls, when archaeologists peel back those floors, when restoration teams finally breach those sealed chambers, what they find challenges everything we think we understand about the people who came before us. The phenomenon itself resists simple categorization. These are not cellars converted for storage, not attics that gradually filled with family heirlooms, not rooms that simply fell out of use as architectural fashions changed. These are deliberate concealments, spaces walled up while still containing furniture, documents, clothing, tools, and stranger things still. Spaces sealed with such care and precision that their very existence was erased from building plans, removed from property deeds, expunged from family records. Spaces that someone wanted hidden not just from casual discovery, but from systematic search. Consider the scale of what we are discussing. In London alone, during the great wave of building surveys conducted after the Second World War, contractors discovered sealed rooms in more than 300 structures dating from the 17th through 19th centuries. In Paris, the number exceeded 400. In Amsterdam, nearly 200. These are merely the documented cases, the discoveries significant enough to warrant official reports. How many more were opened, examined, and quietly resealed? How many remain undiscovered still, waiting behind walls that no one has yet had reason to demolish? The architectural evidence tells us something unsettling about the builders themselves. These sealed chambers were not afterthoughts, not hasty modifications made in moments of panic. They were integrated into the original construction, planned from the foundation up. Load-bearing walls were engineered to support the weight of rooms that would officially not exist. Ventilation shafts were cunningly concealed within chimneys that served other purposes. Access points were hidden behind removable panels disguised as structural elements. This was not the work of amateurs hiding family scandals. This was professional concealment, executed by master craftsmen who understood precisely how to make a space vanish from human knowledge. But let us step back further into the world that created these mysteries. Let us examine the society that felt such compulsion to hide, to seal, to erase. The 17th and 18th centuries present themselves to us through history books as the age of enlightenment, of reason triumphant, of humanity emerging from medieval darkness into the clear light of scientific understanding. Yet the physical evidence, the buildings themselves, the cities they formed, the infrastructure they required, tells a radically different story. Walk through any European city center today and observe what remains from that era. The scale alone should give you pause. These were not structures built by people learning construction for the first time. These were not the tentative experiments of civilizations just discovering how to work stone and timber. These were achievements of such sophistication, such mathematical precision, such engineering audacity, that modern contractors regularly admit they could not replicate them with contemporary tools and methods. The opera houses that seated thousands while projecting whispered voices to the furthest balcony without amplification. The cathedrals whose acoustic properties created reverberation times measured in seconds, tuned to specific musical frequencies. The apartment buildings of 6 and 7 stories, constructed entirely without steel reinforcement, that have stood for 3 centuries, while modern concrete towers crumble after 50 years. And yet, and here the paradox deepens, these same people, these master builders, supposedly lived without indoor plumbing in most cases, without central heating, without gas lighting until very late in the 18th century, without any of the basic amenities we consider essential. They could calculate the load-bearing capacity of massive stone vaults, could design drainage systems that still function perfectly today, could create ventilation networks that moved air through buildings without mechanical assistance, but they could not, we are told, manage basic sanitation in their own homes. The official narrative strains credibility. We are asked to believe that the architects who designed structures of such complexity that modern engineers study them for insights lived in squalor, that the stonemasons who carved decorative elements of such intricacy that they cannot be reproduced today lack the skills to create comfortable domestic environments, that the urban planners who laid out cities with such mathematical precision that their street grids still define traffic flow centuries later somehow failed to grasp elementary principles of public health. Unless, of course, something else was happening. Unless the world we see in those old engravings, those architectural plans, those city maps was not the world being built, but the world being rebuilt. Unless what we interpret as the construction of civilization was actually its reconstruction after something, some event, some catastrophe, some deliberate erasure, had reduced it to ruins. If you enjoy historical stories about the hidden mysteries of the past, please like this video and leave a comment with 1. If you don't, write 0. This helps us understand how valuable these narratives are to you. The sealed rooms offer clues if we dare to read them. When these chambers are opened, certain patterns emerge with disturbing consistency. First, they contain objects that should not exist together in the same time frame. A room sealed in 1763, according to architectural evidence and property records, contains furniture that dendrochronology dates to 1720, books printed in 1745, clothing styles popular in 1752, tools manufactured across a span of decades. It is as though someone gathered artifacts from different eras and sealed them away together, preserving a cross-section of time that contradicts official chronology. Second, these rooms frequently contain documents, personal papers, business records, technical drawings that display knowledge seemingly beyond the capabilities of their supposed era. A sealed chamber in a merchant house in Antwerp, opened in 1987, yielded technical specifications for a water filtration system of such sophistication that the city's modern water authority requested copies for study. The documents were dated 1742. A hidden room in a London townhouse, discovered during renovations in 2003, contained architectural plans for a heating system using principles of thermodynamics that would not be discovered until the mid-19th century. The plans were dated 1798. Third, and most troubling, these sealed spaces often contain evidence of sudden abandonment. Meals left half-eaten on tables, correspondence dated and addressed but never sent, ledgers with entries stopping mid-page, clocks stopped at specific times as though some event interrupted daily life so completely that no one ever returned to complete even the most basic tasks. And the times on those stopped clocks cluster around specific dates, specific years, across different cities, different countries, suggesting not isolated incidents but coordinated catastrophe. The year 1762 appears with eerie frequency. Rooms sealed immediately after that date contain signs of hasty evacuation, of panic, of flight. Documents reference the fires, the floods, the darkness, always without explanation, as though the events were so universally known that no description was necessary, and yet our official histories record 1762 as a year of relative calm, a peaceful moment between larger conflicts, a time of prosperity and growth. How can these two versions of reality coexist? Consider the artwork found in these sealed chambers. Paintings, sketches, technical illustrations, many depicting cities that do not exist in any historical record, showing architectural styles that appear in no documented buildings, portraying technologies that match nothing in museum collections. Are these fantasies, artistic visions of impossible futures? Or are they memories, records of places and things that existed before the concealment, before the erasure, before the rewriting of what humanity was permitted to remember? The sealed rooms of churches and monasteries reveal even stranger patterns. Behind altar walls, beneath chapel floors, within the hollow cores of massive columns, investigators have discovered chambers containing not religious artifacts, as one might expect, but scientific instruments. Astrolabes of such complexity that their full function remains mysterious. Optical devices using lens combinations that suggest understanding of principles supposedly unknown until much later. calculating machines with gear ratios that imply mathematical knowledge far beyond what contemporary documents suggest was possible, and always, these instruments show signs of use, of wear, of having been tools actively employed for purposes we can only guess at. What were the clergy doing with such devices? Why were they hidden? And why, when we examine the construction techniques used to conceal them, do we find evidence that the hiding happened not gradually, not over time, but all at once, as though a decision was made simultaneously across vast distances to erase certain knowledge from human memory? The industrial cities of the 18th and early 19th centuries present their own mysteries. We are taught that this was the age of industrial revolution, of humanity learning for the first time to harness steam power, to mechanize production, to organize labor on factory scales. And yet the archaeological evidence beneath these cities reveals layer upon layer of earlier industrial activity, not primitive precursors, not crude attempts at mechanization, but fully developed industrial infrastructure. Canal systems that required hydraulic engineering of extreme sophistication. Drainage networks designed to handle volumes of water that suggest industrial processes consuming vast quantities. Foundation pilings driven to depths that imply construction equipment of tremendous power, and all of this underlying the first factories, predating them by decades or longer according to stratigraphic analysis, yet appearing in no historical records, no contemporary accounts, no official narratives. Walk through the basements of old factory buildings in Manchester, in Birmingham, in Sheffield. The lowest levels, the oldest foundations, show construction techniques that later builders clearly did not understand. Modern contractors, when restoring these structures, routinely discover that foundation systems they assumed were Victorian were actually built atop much older foundations whose purpose and method of construction remain baffling. Weight distributions that make no sense for the buildings above them. Anchor points for machinery that does not match any industrial equipment in museum collections. Channels and conduits for fluids or gases whose composition we can only speculate about based on residue analysis. It is as though the Industrial Revolution happened twice, first in some earlier age we have no record of, and then again in the 18th century by people who were essentially excavating and relearning what their predecessors had known. The pattern repeats across Europe, across the Americas, across every land where old buildings still stand. Sealed rooms, hidden chambers, concealed spaces, all containing fragments of a story that contradicts official history. And the contradictions are not small discrepancies, not minor errors of dating or attribution. These are fundamental challenges to everything we think we know about human progress, about technological development, about the march of civilization from primitive to advanced. Now let us examine the contents of these rooms more carefully, for here the mystery deepens into something approaching horror. Among the objects most commonly found are tools, but tools of such specialized function that even modern experts struggle to determine their purpose. Precision instruments calibrated to measurements that do not match any standard system. Cutting implements made from alloys whose composition suggests metallurgical knowledge far beyond what period documents describe. Optical equipment ground to tolerances that require technology supposedly not invented until the 20th century. And the tools show wear patterns, evidence of extensive use, proof that they were not decorative objects or experimental oddities, but working instruments employed for purposes we can no longer fathom. Then there are the books. Oh, the books. Volumes found in sealed rooms across Europe tell a story that no official history dares to acknowledge, not merely because of their content, though that alone is disturbing enough, but because of their very existence, their production quality, their distribution patterns. These are not rare manuscripts painstakingly copied by monks. These are printed books produced in quantities that suggest print runs of thousands or tens of thousands, discussing topics that supposedly no one understood in those eras. Advanced mathematics, theoretical physics, chemistry beyond basic alchemy, biological knowledge that would not be rediscovered until the age of microscopy. And many of these books reference earlier works, cite previous authorities, build upon foundations of knowledge that have left no trace in surviving libraries. Where are those earlier works? What happened to the vast corpus of scientific and technical literature that these books presuppose? Did it simply vanish? Or was it systematically destroyed, deliberately erased, removed from human access as part of some coordinated effort to reset civilization at a lower level of development? The sealed rooms also contain something else, something that speaks to an even darker mystery. Clothing, not just garments, but uniforms, standardized dress that suggests organized institutions, coordinated activities, social structures that appear in no historical records. Hospital uniforms from hospitals that never officially existed. Academic robes from universities that have no charters. Military dress from armed forces that claimed allegiance to no recognized nation. And the sizes of these garments, when analyzed systematically, reveal a population whose physical characteristics do not match the populations described in contemporary documents. People taller on average, more robust, showing bone structure and physiological characteristics that suggest either a different genetic lineage or environmental conditions radically unlike those we believe prevailed in those eras. Were there giants among us? Not mythical creatures from fairy tales, but simply humans of greater stature, greater physical capability, perhaps greater longevity. The skeletal remains occasionally found in these sealed chambers suggest this possibility. Bones that forensic analysis dates to the 17th or 18th centuries, yet displaying characteristics that would indicate individuals of unusual height and strength. Not deformities, not pathological gigantism, but simply humans built on a larger scale. And these remains appear often enough in sealed rooms, in buried foundations, in forgotten crypts that they cannot be dismissed as anomalies. They suggest a population that once existed alongside, or perhaps instead of the smaller, weaker humans who appear in official records and period paintings. What happened to these people? Where did they go? And why does their existence appear only in fragments, in hidden spaces, in places someone wanted forgotten? The timeline itself becomes suspect. We are taught a linear progression of history, ancient civilizations, medieval period, Renaissance, Enlightenment, Industrial Revolution, modern age, each era building upon the previous, knowledge accumulating, technology advancing. But the physical evidence tells a different story. It suggests cycles of rise and collapse, of advancement and catastrophic regression, of civilizations reaching heights that were then deliberately or accidentally destroyed, forcing survivors to begin again from a lower level. The sealed rooms might represent attempts to preserve knowledge, to hide away evidence of what had been achieved so that it might survive whatever catastrophe was anticipated or in progress. Consider the infrastructure beneath old cities, the water systems, the drainage networks, the tunnels and passages that thread beneath streets and buildings. Modern municipal engineers, when mapping these systems, consistently discover that the oldest portions, the deepest layers, are not cruder versions of later work, but more sophisticated, better constructed, more precisely engineered, designed with understanding of hydraulic principles that supposedly would not be developed until much later, and these ancient systems are not built atop earth or bedrock. They are built atop older ruins, older foundations, older infrastructure still. How many layers down does this pattern continue? How many cycles of construction and collapse lie beneath our feet, each buried under the debris of its own destruction? The sealed rooms of private homes contain family archives, personal papers that speak to lives we are not supposed to know about, letters describing daily routines that include technologies that should not exist. Diaries mentioning social institutions that have no official record, account books listing products and services that appear in no trade histories, and photographs, yes, photographs, found in rooms sealed allegedly before photographic technology was developed, images of cities showing architecture that does not match any documented buildings, portraits of people wearing clothing that combine styles from different supposed eras. Group photographs showing gatherings of hundreds or thousands in locations that would require organizational capabilities supposedly beyond the people of those times. Are these forgeries, planted evidence, the product of time travelers with a peculiar sense of humor? Or are they genuine records of a reality that has been systematically erased from official history, preserved only in these hidden spaces by people who knew that what they were hiding would someday be important, would someday challenge the false narrative that would be constructed after the catastrophe? The catastrophe itself, what was it? The sealed rooms offer hints. Many contain respiratory protection equipment, masks, and filters far more sophisticated than should exist in those eras. Others hold medical supplies suggesting preparation for epidemic disease or chemical contamination. Still others contain food stores preserved in ways that indicate long-term planning for siege or isolation. And the documents, when they mention the cause of these preparations, speak in veiled terms of the burning, the drowning, the darkness, the forgetting. Fire appears as a recurring theme, not ordinary fires, not accidental blazes, but conflagrations of such scale that they consumed entire cities, entire regions. The written accounts, fragmentary as they are, describe fires that burned for days, that generated their own weather, that left behind layers of ash measured in feet rather than inches. Archaeological excavations beneath old cities confirm this. Between the layers of normal occupation, between the strata of gradual accumulation, there exist burn layers of extraordinary extent. Not isolated building fires, not even citywide disasters like the Great Fire of London. These are regional or even continental burn events, episodes of destruction so complete that they reset entire civilizations. And the timing of these burn layers, when they can be dated, clusters around specific periods: the mid-17th century, the early 18th century, the late 18th century, always periods that official history describes as times of relative peace and prosperity, never as times of apocalyptic catastrophe. How can this discrepancy exist? How can the physical evidence of destruction on continental scales be so completely absent from written records unless those records were systematically falsified, unless someone, after the catastrophes, decided to create a new, sanitized history that erased the truth of what had happened? The sealed rooms might represent more than just hiding places for forbidden objects. They might be time capsules, deliberately created to preserve evidence that someone knew would be erased from official records. The care with which they were sealed, the precision with which they were hidden, the inclusion of specific objects and documents, all suggest intentional preservation, not hasty concealment. Someone was creating a parallel archive, a shadow history that would survive whatever falsification was planned or already in progress. Consider the maps found in these sealed chambers. Not the official maps of known geography, but alternative maps, showing coastlines in different configurations, showing cities in locations where no cities officially existed, showing political boundaries that match no recorded nations. Are these fantasy, the imaginative creations of speculative cartographers? Or are they accurate maps of a world that existed before the catastrophes, before the floods and fires that reshaped continents and erased civilizations? The level of detail in these maps, the precision of their mathematical projections, the consistency of their geographic relationships across multiple independent examples, all suggest that they represent genuine knowledge, not invention. And if these maps are accurate, then we must confront an uncomfortable truth. The world we think we know, the geography we assume has always been as it is now, might be merely the latest configuration, the most recent arrangement after the latest reshaping. How many earlier configurations existed? How many times has the surface of our planet been radically altered, coastlines redrawn, continents flooded or exposed, mountain ranges raised or leveled? And if geography itself has been so unstable, what does that mean for our understanding of human history? How can we trust any chronology when the very landscape might have been completely different during the events we are trying to date? The architectural evidence supports this unsettling possibility. Buildings that official records date to the 18th century show clear signs of having been partially submerged at some point before being excavated and restored. First-story windows that were originally upper-story windows. Ground floors that are actually second or third floors, built atop earlier levels that were filled in or buried. Door frames designed for human heights much greater than what we consider normal. Ceiling heights in basement rooms that suggest they were originally designed as primary living spaces. The clear implication is that many old buildings are not showing us their true age or original context. They are survivors, partially excavated from burial, cleaned up and repurposed by people who found them and claimed them, but did not build them. Who did build them? The construction techniques visible in the oldest portions of these structures do not match the capabilities described in period documents. The tools required do not exist in museum collections. The mathematical knowledge implied by their design appears in no contemporary textbooks. And the scale, the sheer ambition of these projects, speaks to a society with resources, organization, and vision far beyond what official history attributes to those eras. Were these structures built by the same people who sealed the rooms? Or were they built by even earlier inhabitants, people whose existence has been so completely erased that we have no records of them at all? The demographic puzzle deepens the mystery. If we believe official histories, the populations of European cities in the 17th and 18th centuries were small, impoverished, frequently devastated by disease and famine. Yet the infrastructure of those cities, the water systems, the roads, the buildings themselves, suggests populations much larger, much more prosperous, much more organizationally sophisticated than official records indicate. The capacity of old amphitheaters, opera houses, churches far exceeds what would be needed for the populations supposedly living in those cities. Were these structures built with absurd excess, or were they built for populations that actually existed but have been erased from our demographic records? And then there are the orphanages, vast institutions appearing suddenly in the late 18th and early 19th centuries, designed to house thousands of children. Official history tells us these were built to address the social problems of industrialization, to care for children whose parents could not support them. But the timing is peculiar. These orphanages appear not gradually, not as a slow response to a developing problem, but suddenly, all at once, as though in response to some acute crisis that produced thousands or tens of thousands of orphaned children simultaneously. Where did all these children come from? What happened to their parents? And why does the official explanation feel so inadequate, so clearly incomplete? Could it be that these orphanages were not caring for the children of poor industrial workers, but rather for the survivors of something much more catastrophic? Children whose parents were lost not to poverty or disease, but to the same events that left those burn layers in the archaeological strata, that buried those first-floor windows, that filled those sealed rooms with evidence someone wanted to preserve. Children who were then raised without knowledge of their true heritage, educated in a carefully constructed false history, trained to forget what their parents had known. The pattern of cultural amnesia is too consistent to be accidental. Across Europe, across the Americas, the early 19th century marks a clear break in collective memory. Folk traditions that should have continuity suddenly change. Architectural styles that developed gradually for centuries suddenly shift. Technologies that were common become exotic curiosities. Knowledge that was widespread becomes the province of specialists or is lost entirely. It is as though an entire civilization underwent a massive memory wipe, emerging from some trauma with only fragmentary recollections of what had come before. The sealed rooms might have been created by people who saw this coming, who understood that knowledge was going to be lost, systematically erased, or forbidden. They sealed away evidence not to hide it from their contemporaries, but to preserve it for future generations, for descendants who would eventually question the official narratives and go looking for truth in the hidden places. We are those descendants. We are the ones for whom those rooms were sealed. But what truth did they want preserved? What knowledge was so dangerous, so threatening to whoever orchestrated the erasure, that it had to be hidden at such cost, with such care? The contents of the rooms suggest answers, but the answers raise questions more disturbing than the mystery itself. The technology hidden in sealed chambers is not primitive. It is not crude attempts at mechanisms that later inventors would perfect. Much of it is more sophisticated than what we use today, based on principles we do not fully understand, designed with knowledge that appears nowhere in our educational system. Optical devices using arrangements of lenses that create effects we cannot explain. Acoustic equipment that manipulates sound in ways that should not be possible. Medical instruments whose purpose we can barely guess, but whose construction implies understanding of human physiology far beyond what period documents suggest was known. And energy devices, the energy devices, mechanisms that appear designed to capture, store, or transform energy in ways that match no known physical principles, yet whose construction quality and wear patterns prove they functioned, that they were practical tools serving real purposes. Were we more advanced in the past than we are now? Does history actually move backwards, with knowledge and capability declining over time rather than advancing? The sealed rooms scream this possibility, demand that we confront it, force us to question every assumption we hold about human progress. If civilization has collapsed and been reset multiple times, if we are currently living in a dark age compared to what came before, then everything we believe about our place in history is wrong. We are not the peak of human achievement. We are survivors, descendants of catastrophe, people who forgot what our ancestors knew and are only now beginning to remember. The evidence is everywhere once you learn to see it. The impossibly old buildings that official chronology cannot explain, the buried infrastructure that suggests much larger populations, the sealed rooms containing technology and knowledge that should not exist, the demographic anomalies, the orphanages, the cultural amnesia, the burn layers, the flood sediments, the clear signs of catastrophic reshaping, and the persistent, nagging feeling that the official story does not add up, that we are being lied to about who we are and where we came from. What happened to the giants? What happened to the advanced civilization they represented? Where did the knowledge go? Who decided that humanity should forget, should regress, should be reset at a lower level? And why do the sealed rooms exist at all if not as evidence that someone, somewhere, at some time, decided to preserve the truth against the day when we would be ready to handle it? That day might be now. As more sealed rooms are discovered, as more evidence emerges, as more people begin questioning official narratives and demanding answers that make sense, we approach a threshold. A point where the accumulated weight of physical evidence simply cannot be reconciled with official history, where the contradictions become too glaring to ignore, where the questions demand answers no matter how uncomfortable those answers might be. Imagine for a moment that everything you were taught about history is wrong, not slightly wrong, not mistaken in minor details, but fundamentally, comprehensively wrong. Imagine that civilization is much older than we believe, that it has risen and fallen multiple times, that we are living in a carefully constructed false reality designed to keep us ignorant of our true heritage. Imagine that the sealed rooms were created to help us remember, to give us clues that would eventually lead us back to truth. Now stop imagining. Look at the evidence. It is all real. The sealed rooms exist. The objects they contain cannot be explained. The official history does not account for them. And somewhere, in the hidden spaces of old buildings, in the forgotten chambers beneath ancient cities, in the sealed repositories that have not yet been discovered, more evidence waits, more proof that we are not who we think we are, that history is not what we were told, that humanity's story is far stranger, far older, and far more tragic than any official narrative dares to admit. The question is not whether sealed rooms existed or what was hidden inside them. The question is why. Why did someone go to such extraordinary lengths to hide evidence of a more advanced past? What catastrophe destroyed that civilization? Who orchestrated the erasure of its memory? And what does it mean for us, the descendants, living on the ruins of something we cannot remember, using technologies we do not understand, following a false history that keeps us ignorant of our true potential? The sealed rooms are speaking to us across the centuries. They are telling us to question, to investigate, to doubt official stories, to look for truth in hidden places. They are reminding us that what is buried can be excavated, that what is forgotten can be remembered, that what is sealed can be opened. They are evidence that someone long ago cared enough about truth to preserve it against all odds, trusting that future generations would be wise enough to find it and brave enough to accept what it reveals. We stand at that moment now. The evidence is before us. The questions are clear. All that remains is whether we have the courage to pursue answers wherever they lead, even if those answers overturn everything we thought we knew. The sealed rooms have been opened, the contents have been catalogued. The implications can no longer be ignored. History is not what we were told. Civilization is not what we believe, and we, the inheritors of ruins, the descendants of amnesia, the children of catastrophe, must decide whether to continue accepting comfortable lies or to embrace uncomfortable truths. The choice, as it always has been, is ours. But the sealed rooms have ensured that ignorance is no longer an option. The evidence exists, the questions are asked, and truth, however deeply buried, however carefully hidden, however systematically erased, has a way of emerging eventually. The only question is whether we will be ready to accept it when it does.